change, and that's different from the Obama administration, who of course worked with, all Google people. So betting on Thiel Palantir awarded US and UK coronavirus tracking and Space Force software contracts. That is the latest news about that today. Palantir, the surveillance firm founded by Trump ally Peter Thiel, has landed a contract with the federal government to track coronavirus, the Daily Beast reports. The article entitled "Trump Administration Turns to Peter Thiel's Palantir to Track Coronavirus" claims that Thiel's firm will work with the HHS to create a database. This is something that they didn't fully talk about today. I mean, they didn't name the new platform that is supposed to be unveiled later this week, but they did talk about contact tracing, and Birx talked about the modeling that she looks at. That's what this is, apparently. A Silicon Valley company co-founded by a close ally of President Donald Trump will play a major new role in helping the government track the spread of coronavirus, pulling information that is being used by top administration officials, including the president himself. Palantir, the data mining firm created by investor Peter Thiel, is best known for its work with global intelligence, military, and law enforcement agencies. Now, the company has a contract with the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, to help the federal government create a new platform called HHS Protect Now. That will be the name of the platform. The Daily Beast has confirmed Palantir will provide a major aspect of the analytics platform. Sources familiar told the Daily Beast that Palantir's data suites will be a primary contributor to HHS Protect Now, if not the core element of the tool. That is interesting. Palantir's involvement in the creation of a new government coronavirus data platform system underscores the Trump administration's reliance on close political allies of the president to respond to a global pandemic. Thiel was Trump's earliest and highest profile backer in Silicon Valley and delivered a primetime speech at the 2016 Republican National Convention. A top donor to conservative causes and the first outside investor in Facebook, Thiel was, according to the Wall Street Journal, instrumental in pushing the social networking giant to allow politicians to lie in advertisements on the platform. It is a policy that many outside observers believe will help the Trump campaign. Yeah, right. Which Thiel has, again, pledged to support. Right, because what's the implication there? That the Trump campaign lies in its advertisements? Please. Give me a break.
This is the Daily Beast, so, kind of expected this.
Exactly. The article appears to be emphasizing the fact that Peter Thiel has been a vocal Trump supporter, so they're saying this is evidence that Trump awards contracts based on personal ties. However, Palantir has a history of working with the federal government and states, as well as the military, and unlike Google, they don't praise China. Its software is designed for scalable tracking, which has been used in association with ICE. They've been helping Customs and Border Patrol, which again, Google refused to work with them. So it would seem to be a good, sensible choice based on that criteria, right?
Wait a minute, is this different? This Palantir, is that different than the one that was from P-Tech? I'm sorry, I was thinking of P-Tech for some reason.
Oh, no, it's not P-Tech.
No, yeah, my bad.
But it's still not the greatest either. I mean, they have access to a lot of information. If you ever heard of the show Person of Interest, that show is based on Palantir's software, right? Person of Interest. If you guys are familiar with that, that should give you an idea of how the software works.
I watched every show.
Yeah, I thought it was a good show too.
Great show.
But that's a perfect example. That was actually based on the Palantir software at the time and what it was able to do, its analytics. So that gives you a good idea of what it is and how it can be scaled, right? So I think that's interesting that they try to make the focus of their article about, oh, he's just, relying on his allies and stuff, and he's awarding contracts to his friends. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think that there's a good argument to be made that Palantir is, one of the best choices for something like this, a kind of application like this. And the other thing is that, they've been helping with the wall, right? The Border Patrol, they've been helping monitor the border. So when Q says the fight for the wall is about so much more, it's not just a wall, it's a surveillance system as well to track what's coming over that wall and under the wall as well.
And POTUS actually pointed out that the wall is much more meaningful than just the wall that he's building on the southern border.
That's
today,
right.
In his presser.
Yeah, even today he's pointing that out. The article goes on to claim that the project called HHS Protect Now platform will be unveiled later this week, that it will pull data from across the federal government, state and local governments, healthcare facilities, and colleges to help administration officials determine how to mitigate and prevent spread of the coronavirus, according to a spokesperson for the department. This is actually part of a larger trend for Palantir, who has been working with the U.S. Army. As Google works with China on artificial intelligence, Peter Thiel was prompted to call on the FBI and CIA to investigate Google, and they're working with Chinese military intelligence. It was reported by Bloomberg just in February 2020 that Peter Thiel's Palantir won a $823 million government contract. That can tell you a lot, too, about where this is going, right? Palantir Technologies scored another win in Washington Tuesday, securing a contract worth as much as $823 million to provide software for the DoD, according to communications reviewed by Bloomberg. The 4-year deal represents more than a decade of work by the Palo Alto, California-based data mining startup to break into the club of existing defense contractors and bolster the company's prospects as it prepares to go public with an IPO. As reported by Lizette Chapman of Bloomberg in February of this year, Palantir recently scored a contract with the DoD. They're going to be providing them with special software. So this shows that it's not just the Trump administration or Trump per se betting on Thiel and Palantir, right? You're now seeing the Pentagon shifting away from some of these other Silicon Valley companies and working with non-traditional and startup companies and companies like Palantir. The contract is the second half of a larger project. Palantir and Raytheon won the first half of the deal in 2018 worth $876 million. It's a big investment. The second part involves Palantir working with BAE Systems to replace the U.S. Army's distributed common ground system. That's a big deal, winning that particular contract used for aggregating and analyzing data, which has faced technical challenges, and that's something that the military seriously relies on. Palantir sued the Army in 2016 to win the right to compete for the new contract after the U.S. Government Accountability Office determined the old system was underperforming and over budget. What a surprise, right? Of course. The deal will increase annual sales at Palantir's government division from its current $500 million or so, according to people familiar with Palantir's finances who asked not to be identified, discussing private information. Investor Peter Thiel co-founded Palantir in 2004, and the company's software has been used for controversial ends, according to Bloomberg, like enabling the immigration deportation policies. Oh, you mean defending the border and national security, championed by President Trump, as well as for philanthropic ones like preventing sex trafficking and finding missing children. They are calling that controversial,
Yeah.
Preventing sex trafficking and finding missing children apparently is controversial to Bloomberg. How dare you, Palantir? How dare you, Peter Thiel? You don't get to find missing children and stop sex trafficking. That's controversial. Ugh.
That's just plain inhumane.
Right? Yeah.
and this is coming from Bloomberg, theoretically kind of center, middle of the road, but apparently not so much.
Right. This is why you have to look at a variety of sources, because you get interesting nuggets like this. About half of Palantir's business relies on deals with large corporate customers like Merck, KGaA, and Airbus Southeast, which use the software to manage drug discovery and, here's another important part, improve supply chain logistics. Supply chain. The company is exploring both an IPO and a direct listing, but does not yet have a target date for going public, Bloomberg has reported. As the article states, Palantir is looking into supply chain logistics and strengthening the medical supply chain, as well as the new drug discovery process. Tom McKay of Gizmodo is also reporting on this most recent move by the Trump administration in an article entitled "Trump Admin Gives Coronavirus Tracking Contract to Peter Thiel's Palantir Report" that discusses the United Kingdom's NHS contract as well. Palantir, the surveillance firm founded by conservative billionaire Peter Thiel, has landed a contract with the feds to build a database tracking the spread of the novel coronavirus across the country, according to the Daily Beast. Sources told the publication Palantir data products will be a primary or even core to a health and human services project called Protect Now, and will pull data from federal, state, and local governments, as well as universities and medical facilities. The purpose of the project is to mitigate and prevent spread of the virus, an HHS person told the site. Now, prevent spread and mitigate sounds like, I don't know. It sounds a little bit more than just monitoring. We're not going to just be monitoring. Maybe we'll give this information to the feds and, or the states, and they're going to prevent you from spreading this. I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Sure does seem like it's proactive.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
People
will they come around with welders and make sure you stay in your house?
Yeah, like China, right? Yeah. People have actually likened this to a Chinese-style real-time surveillance thing, and perhaps a Patriot Act for health data. And I'm not a fan of that, so I like to look at all different sides of the argument here and point out what I think is good and bad. Palantir's involvement is likely to raise eyebrows, as Thiel is both its chairman and a prominent Trump supporter who is pledged to support the president's re-election campaign. He also reportedly was involved in pushing Facebook, where he holds a board seat. He's on Facebook's board of directors, to allow political lies and ads, even setting up a meeting between, listen to this, Mark Zuckerberg and Trump at the White House. So this ties back into what I said about changing the culture of Silicon Valley and how Trump never stops trying to work with these people and win them over to his way of thinking. Disclosure, Thiel secretly bankrolled a lawsuit that bankrupted Gizmodo's parent company, Gawker. That's the people that are reporting this, by the way. They have a personal stake in this. They don't like Thiel because he sued them and took down Gawker. Exactly, out of existence. According to the Wall Street Journal, Palantir data predicted the potential for the coronavirus to become a worldwide crisis earlier this year. In fact, Thiel had pulled back his employees from around the world, brought them back to the country because he said that this was going to happen. Something that experts in infectious disease and public health also saw coming. It also already has pandemic modeling contracts in over a dozen foreign countries, including with the UK's National Health Service, the Greek government, and some states in Germany. Remember, Thiel was born in Germany, and then he moved to America when he was still very young. However, the paper reported that Palantir is facing pressure from investors to start turning a profit, even as some of its wealthiest corporate clients were cutting back due to pandemic losses, resulting in plans for deep cost cutting and a potential delay to its initial public offering. Thiel sold some of his stake in the company at below its $20 billion valuation, sources told the Journal. And one of the things about Palantir that was a fact was for a while it wasn't making a profit. It was being utilized by government agencies and offices, but it hadn't necessarily taken off, and it was prevented in some cases from being allowed to bid on these bigger contracts that certain companies were always having awarded to them, like Amazon. I think this reflects a change not only in the Trump administration, but in the national security establishment in the United States and the Pentagon to rely no longer on companies like Facebook and Google, who have seemed eager to work with our adversaries and eager to change the way they operate to better assist our adversaries in things like censorship, right? Palantir has helped the NSA with espionage, has contracts with the Pentagon to provide real-time maps and analytics to soldiers in the field, something Google didn't do, and provided back-end support for the New York City Office of Special Enforcement crackdowns, the article points out.
Oh, come on now. Let's not knock Google. They did provide maps to the enemy showing where our guys were.
Right? They're not that bad, guys.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not totally evil. Earlier this week, Sandra Irwin of Space News reported on a contract between Palantir and U.S. Space Force for data and software. Washington data analytics company Palantir has won a contract to provide software and data services to U.S. Space Force units that track objects in orbit and monitor space traffic. Now that is interesting. To track objects in orbit. The contract is for a project called Kobayashi Maru, an effort started last year by the U.S. Space Force's Space and Missile Systems Center to replace decades-old space command and control software with more modern apps. Palantir, based in Silicon Valley, was selected for the project by the Space Enterprise Consortium, an organization that SMC created in 2017 to attract startups and non-traditional companies to the defense market. Again, another signal that they're done working with places like Google and Facebook.
That's an interesting name for that, though. Did you guys catch that? The Kobayashi Maru?
Yes.
That's from Star Trek. It's an unwinnable scenario.
Yes.
What?
Yes, it's a.
Or it also could be maybe like a goat rodeo. It's like just everything has to go right.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder where they picked that from. Well, that was the name given to it by Space Force. The unbeatable Starfleet test. Interesting. Well, I love stuff like this. That's fascinating. So they're, again, signaling that they're looking to work with startups and non-traditional companies and bring in innovation into the military, right, into military technology. Known as SPEC, S-P-E-C, the consortium announced the contract award on April 14th. The value of the contract was not disclosed. That is also interesting. Contracts awarded by the SPEC are not like traditional military procurements where there's a normal bidding and contracting purpose or process. Members of the consortium, currently about 360, receive solicitations for bids, and one or more winners are selected per project. The companies then develop prototypes that, if successful, can transition to production on a very short timeline. For the Kobayashi Maru project, other companies are also expected to get contracts in addition to Palantir, so this isn't an exclusive thing, right? Kobayashi Maru, named after a training program in Star Trek Starfleet Academy, was created following a years-long failed effort to develop a joint space operations center mission system. So that failed. It was a decades-long project that went nowhere. The consortium issued a solicitation for the Kobayashi Maru project on January 20th, and bidders were given 15 days to respond. The Space C2 Kobayashi Maru Data as a Service platform will provide the U.S. Space Force a robust and flexible set of data streaming and storage technologies, as well as data access patterns for the Space C2 system of systems, according to a program description sent to consortium members. The vendor shall provide software licenses and professional services as necessary to implement this integrated platform and train users. The space data services will be tested at the Combined Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California and the National Space Defense Center at Schriever Air Force Base in Colorado. These are the military's primary units that track space traffic and orbital activities. Very interesting. The fact that Palantir was awarded these recent major contracts will probably send a message to the big tech companies in Silicon Valley that think it's cute to work with adversaries like communist China. We are watching. It should be noted.
Love it.
Right? It should be noted this contract is different than traditional government contracts. A consortium of companies are tapped to produce prototypes, and Palantir will not be the only company awarded a contract. But not everybody sees these recent developments as good. Peter Jukes tweets out, got some interesting revelations about the UK government, Palantir, and faculty AI coming up soon on Byline Times via David Henke. But the Guardian article by Paul Lewis and David Kahn is a great primer, and they link to this article here, UK government using confidential patient data in coronavirus tracking. Documents seen by Guardian show tech firms using information to build a COVID-19 data store. Here is the piece. The Palantir faculty contract was not put out to tender. The UK government's COVID-19 contract with the data surveillance firm owned by Trump backer Peter Thiel was approved under an obscure statutory instrument. That is interesting. Byline Times reveals that the contract with the data surveillance firm was not put out to tender. Some see this as too much concentration of power in the hands of one company. Carolyn Orr says, HHS has 187 data sets integrated into the platform with inputs that include hospital capacity and inventories, supply chain data from the government and industry, diagnostic and geographic testing data, demographic data, state policy actions, and coronavirus flu-like ER data. So that's a lot of information to have for one company, right?
How coincidental is the 187?
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
yeah, creepy, right?
You mentioned that number a couple of times.
I know.
You know, in a kind of a different context, but
exactly. And listen to the name of this program they have, Gotham.
oh, that's not disturbing.
I know. It's unclear if Gotham, a Palantir tool that was created for intelligence agencies and law enforcement to track targets, will be separate from the COVID-19 platform, or if it will be used to help with the contact tracing. This is so that's disturbing, she says. That's something that was discussed today. You heard Fauci and Birx talk about contact tracing, and Pence brought it up. Gotham was something that was already created for tracking people. So like I said, that Palantir's technology is scalable, meaning they can easily go from local, state to federal. They can roll something out quickly that would be maybe similar to Gotham that, you know, would, I think, be appropriate perhaps for tracking this thing. You know, if that's what is needed. On April 10th, Palantir received a $17.3 million contract with HHS for a different and older data integration tool called Gotham. It's unclear if Gotham, which started out as a tool for law enforcement and intelligence agencies to track targets, will be separate from HHS Protect or will aid in performing contact tracing. That HHS contract is nowhere near Palantir's most lucrative. In February, the forms half of a Pentagon data management contract worth over $800 million. That's the one that we read about with Raytheon. Many are suspicious of Thiel and his motives. Ed Pertwee tweeted out a data mining firm owned by Trump-supporting Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel, who bought a 477-acre estate in New Zealand in 2015 as a bolt hole in the event of social collapse, has a contract with the U.S. government to track the spread of COVID-19. And I guess the implication there is, did he know something was going to happen? I mean, there seems to be some foreknowledge there. What does that mean? And what does that tell you? I see that dear Lord, we're buffering again as everybody.
Target.
Yeah, over the target, apparently. Hopefully you just come back out and come back in, and then we're okay. So that's creepy, right, that he did that. Incidentally, Thiel is not the only Silicon Valley plutocrat to own an apocalypse bolt hole in New Zealand. A number of them have reportedly already fled there over the past few weeks. Here's an article about that from entrepreneur.com. Some Silicon Valley bigwigs have reportedly already scurried to New Zealand. And you all know that New Zealand is the one that has, I guess, a man-woman running it. I don't know how else to describe it.
She, or if that's what you could call her, has a package.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so some Silicon Valley bigwigs have reportedly already scurried to their doomsday shelters in New Zealand. They don't want to be with the plebs like the rest of us, right? Those with money in the valley, as well as lucrative industries, have become known in recent years for investing in preparations for disaster scenarios such as viral outbreaks. Remember Epstein's doomsday meetings in 2012 on his orgy island. What do these people know about? What did they think was coming that they were preparing for?
Are they talking about last weekend? The date of the article is today. So this last weekend, think about what Solomon said.
Ooh.
And now that he kind of walked it back, and then now they know where they're going, don't they? And this tracking software seems to be playing right into this.
Yeah, right. Maybe that's why they're screeching about it so much, and they're so upset about, Peter Thiel working to stop sex trafficking. It's so controversial.
And you might point out also that, it used to be the standard operating procedure for battlefield tactics was high ground before they got airplanes and missiles and helicopters, etc. Well, islands aren't any more safe than high ground anymore. Yeah, right. Oh, cool. I have an interesting article that was sent to me by Captain Roy. I will pull this up in a minute too, that talks about this Kobayashi Maru and the philosophy of Star Trek, the no-win scenarios and ethical leadership. We'll bring that up and look at it in a minute because I think that's interesting. But yeah, this was just from yesterday for Entrepreneur reporting this. The wealthiest in society, including the deep-pocketed of Silicon Valley, the so-called smart money, had developed a reputation for turning to New Zealand as a doomsday shelter destination hotspot. As Bloomberg reports, some of them have already fled to their luxurious hideaways in the country as the coronavirus disease known as COVID-19 continues to spread throughout the U.S. Bay Area entrepreneur Mihai Dănălescu and his wife caught an Auckland-bound plane in early March, just 4 days before New Zealand closed its borders to foreigners, though local news outlets have reported private plane landings since the shutdown. Different rules for them, right? That's right. How many stacks of $100 bills is it going to take to let me land my plane? Unbelievable.
So he told Bloomberg Demescu that he's since connected with around 10 others who have also escaped to the country during the pandemic. The general manager of Rising ESCO, a Texas-based doomsday shelter provider, told the publication he received a phone call in early March from a Silicon Valley executive struggling to access the secret door to his New Zealand underground bunker. He'd never used the bunker before and was asking questions pertaining to the water and air filters, as well as the power in hot water heater. In recent years, since this slice of the elite,
this is like you can pay all you want. You can pay all you want for that kind of thing, but if you don't actually have survivor skills, then it means nothing.
It's not going to help you. You're going to have to call somebody to ask how to open the door.
I want to say,
how do I get water again?
The password.
Yep. So even in their hubris, you know, it always comes back on them, I think. All right, so we'll move on. You guys can read that. It's linked in here, the rest of that article on your own. Evidently, Thiel and a slew of other Silicon Valley bigwigs created doomsday bunkers in New Zealand, which is becoming more Orwellian and authoritarian each day under the reign of the man-woman leader.
That was interesting. One last thing I'd say about that previous article. I think escape was a very good choice of word there.
Yeah, right. Oh, and they pointed out specifically Steve Huffman from Reddit. You remember him and his, he made posts about cannibalism. Cannibalism.
Well, he got his very own Q post with the symbolism.
He did. That's right. So, you know, some claim that Thiel and Jared Kushner are the real allies, right? That Thiel is more aligned with Kushner than Trump, and that's sort of why he's supporting the Trump administration. So some claim that Thiel and Kushner are allies and are now working on a Patriot Act for health data. You know, this you have to wonder about things like HIPAA, right? Do I want Google or somebody like Google having all of my information, all my health information? No, especially not if I'm an independent journalist, right? Palantir's contract with the CDC sounds very, this is DD Reporter, by the way, reporting this. Palantir's contract with the CDC sounds very similar to the contract they signed with the UK government. Yes, it does. We know the UK relied on Palantir's algorithm and data to justify pursuing a herd immunity strategy, which models predict would kill 250,000 people. Again, these are models, and a lot of these models have been incorrect. And I think that Palantir, one thing that they are good at is making predictions and stuff based on game theory, so improbability. So that's one thing that, you know, is something to keep in mind. Knowing that Peter Thiel, one of the first investors in Facebook and one of the first investors in Jared Kushner's cadre, one has to wonder if the reason why Jared survives is because he could blunder his way into getting a bailout that would lead to a Patriot Act for health data. That's an article coming from Politico, so they're not obviously a Trump administration fan. And they basically said that Kushner set up his own shadow COVID task force, right? That there's the one that is out there that you're seeing, you know, in the press conferences. And then some people claim, like Politico, that Jared Kushner is running his own task force, and that this is where the Palantir contract comes from. White House senior advisor Jared Kushner's task force has reached out to a range of health technology companies about creating a national coronavirus surveillance system to give the government a near real-time view of where patients are seeking treatment and for what, and whether hospitals can accommodate them, according to 4 people with knowledge of the discussions. The proposed national network could help determine which areas of the country can safely relax social distancing rules and which should remain vigilant, but it would also represent a significant expansion of government use of individual patient data, forcing new reckoning over privacy limits amid a national crisis. What privacy? You know, I'm sorry. Do we have, I see you, Aaron.
out there in live chat. Do we have privacy or not? Aaron says, don't sign the HIPAA waiver if you don't want to share. Pay cash. I have a doctor I use for cash, no HIPAA waiver stuff. Yeah, this stuff I find a little bit disturbing, I do have to say. Health privacy laws already grant broad exceptions for national security purposes. There's that word again, always in the name of national security. But the prospect of compiling a national database of potentially sensitive health information has prompted concerns about its impact on civil liberties well after the coronavirus threat recedes, with some critics comparing it to the Patriot Act enacted after the 9/11 attacks. The argument is basically, well, if you let them roll this thing out, they're not going to pull it back in. I mean, once it's rolled out, the contracts are awarded, money is invested, right? We're talking multi-million-dollar contracts. This isn't going away. And we already know that similar software is being used on the border and stuff, so just keeping that, all of that in mind. The Trump administration has sought to ease data sharing rules and assure health data companies they won't be penalized for sharing information with state and federal officials, a move driven in part by Kushner's push to assemble the national network, according to an individual with knowledge of the decision. Well, if he doesn't, though, don't you think that they're going to attack him for not doing enough? And we're talking about something that, you know, the sharing of information with state and federal officials could be helpful in some cases, but it also raises the potential for serious abuse, right? This is a genuine crisis. We have to work through it and do our best to protect people's health, said Jessica Rich, a former director of the FTC's Consumer Protection Bureau that does nothing to protect consumers. But doing that doesn't mean we have to destroy privacy. Currently, the federal government plays only a limited role in handling health information, with its access restricted by various privacy laws and in many cases reliant on voluntary data sharing agreements with individual states. So that's another thing that's been going on. You guys can read the rest of that on your own, that Politico article, if you so choose. Other people that disagree with this say, "Dear mother of effing God, Peter Thiel, HHS Protect Now system pulls data from across federal government, state and local governments, healthcare facilities, and colleges to help mitigate and prevent spread." People are comparing this to a Minority Report style system, you know, that kind of is similar to what people have said Bill Barr was trying to roll out. This, you know, that there was talk of before the coronavirus thing happened. It was, what were they calling it? HARPA, right? Like a DARPA, but for health, HARPA, Health Advanced Research Projects Agency, that Ivanka had been talking about. That was well before the coronavirus outbreak occurred, and people weren't sure that was a good idea, right? And the pre-crime thing that Bill Barr has talked about. I'm not a fan of stuff like that, you know, but that's just me. Interesting that a former federal government official who works for In-Q-Tel, a CIA vehicle founded by Peter Thiel, was part of the Red Dawn email group. That's interesting. So that is the Mustard Man responding to Aaron Bonko talking about this. I don't think things are as black and white, though, as some people would like us to believe. While Peter Thiel may be a horrible man, if you've heard about the Ambrosia Young Blood Clinic, you know what I'm talking about. He has made some astute and important observations about big tech and globalization, and he's a voice in Silicon Valley that is different and at least seems more common sense, right? Albion Seed tweeted out, Peter Thiel recently observed that one of the best barometers of globalization is the share of corporate sector profits going to the financial sector. And the globalization gravy train. This is an article in the American Mind that is talking about what Peter Thiel was saying. When you have an economy built on borrowing money from China and then buying the stuff China makes, you need a robust financial sector. Getting all of that money from the U.S. to China and then there and back again
takes, well, money. And for 2 decades, while America has consumed much and made very little, there's been no better industry than moving fake currency from one location to another. Even if you zoom out of the finance industry, it's hard to find an American tycoon who hasn't benefited directly or indirectly from the rise of Beijing. Peter Thiel is right to say that. That's absolutely true. So, yeah, that's important to point out.
Mm-hmm. Currency trading has really seriously damaged everybody that it touches.
Yeah, and so Thiel is a very difficult person to put your thumb on and figure out. You can't decide if he's working for the good guys or the bad guys, you know, what he's up to. And I find that to be interesting. And he clearly has an interesting relationship with President Trump. I believe this is something the Trump administration understands. They understand this. This is why they're, I think, working with places like Palantir to work on changing our reliance on some of these big tech monopolies. This is why you're seeing the Pentagon start to award projects to newer tech companies, to unheard of startups, to places like Palantir. And they're trying to change our reliance on monopolies because that helps protect the supply chain. Decentralization would help the supply chain greatly, especially the medical supply chain. We don't want to be reliant on China, like we just read about, for, you know, all these things, while also our elites benefit from the rise of China. That's a problem, you know. You have a whole society built on that. That's what's been going on. And so that has to change, and it will. And I think it is. And I think that the awarding of these contracts herald that new era, that we're going to be doing things differently from here on out. And we're not going to be working with these companies that want to appease China. That's not happening anymore. So this is something Trump understands. Just as recently as yesterday's coronavirus task force presser, Trump pointed out the 20-plus year deindustrialization of America and the sending of our jobs and manufacturing over to China, and how that has been that's exposed so much during this crisis. You know, Zev Shalev tweeted out, "I'd completely forgotten about Peter Thiel's herpes island vaccine trial. Just the type of guy you want advising the HHS." Of course, this is written by Ars Technica, who themselves had employed a pedophile named Peter Bright, who was just sentenced to 10 years in prison for trying to molest 2 children. So that's that publication. They didn't know. I mean, how good they are at investigative journalism if they didn't know they had a pedophile working for them. Just saying. But it is a disturbing and bizarre story. We'll just briefly bring this up. Thiel invested in research on a herpes vaccine trial that began in U.S. hotel rooms. That became a scandal in 2017. You guys are more than welcome to read that story on your own.
I don't think I'll skip that contact tracing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Oh my goodness. There are many things here that are alarming. There's also the need for change in Silicon Valley. I'm hoping that President Trump is aware of these major concerns of the American people, that we have the right to privacy and to have our health information protected.